Good Monday afternoon. It is July 29th, 2019, and the tropics, both in the Pacific and the Atlantic, getting a little more active, especially the Pacific. We have ERICK and FLOSSIE, both currently tropical storms, expected both to strengthen into hurricanes, and one of the two at least could become a major hurricane. Out in the Atlantic, nothing named right now, but there are a few tropical waves that do garner some attention that we're going to focus on in just a little bit. We'll start, though, in the Pacific. We right now have the fifth and sixth named storms of the year. ERICK and FLOSSIE right now, both at tropical storm status. Again, we're already going through the list pretty quickly here, and we're getting closer to the peak of that hurricane season, especially out in the Pacific. There's ERICK and FLOSSIE represented on the infrared satellite imagery, and what the infrared does is it tells us the temperatures of the cloud tops, which lets us know how intense the thunderstorm activity is. So here's a close-up look of Tropical Storm ERICK as of the latest advisory. 70-mile-an-hour winds. You need 74 or greater to be considered a Category 1 hurricane, and this is well on its way. If you look at the satellite presentation here, when you see the white cloud tops and even pink for a little bit, those are very high, very cold cloud tops, very intense thunderstorm activity. Once we see that fully wrap around the center of circulation with ERICK, that's when we'll get a closed-off center, and that's when we'll start to see some rapid intensification with this storm. Of the two, this one is most likely to be the strongest because FLOSSIE is moving in right behind it. So ERICK's already churning up the waters and cooling things down a little bit and using up some of that energy. So where is ERICK heading? Right now, it is a tropical storm. You notice here it is expected to make it to a Category 3 major hurricane status. In the long run, it does make a run towards Hawaii, but looks to pass south of Hawaii at this point. Also at this point in time, 5 days out, it does start to weaken back down to a tropical storm. You say, why? Well, increased wind shear and also some cooler waters will start to influence that system as it gets out here and weaken it, making it not so much of a threat to the Hawaiian Islands. Here is FLOSSIE, tropical storm right behind ERICK. This now sits with winds at 50 miles per hour. Tropical storm and up is 39 miles per hour, all the way up to 74. This looks a little bit less organized than what you saw with ERICK, but this, of course, too, is expected to strengthen in the 5-day cone from the National Hurricane Center up to a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane. This one, way far out in the future, though. We're looking at 7 to 9 days out when it gets anywhere close to Hawaii. But this one does look to take a track to the north of Hawaii, and this will bring it into much less conducive environment for it to maintain a hurricane status. Cooler waters there and increased wind shear too. Now, here's sea surface temperatures. Anywhere that's shaded in orange is waters that are warm enough to sustain tropical activity, warmer than 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are the forecast tracks on both systems in the Pacific. Notice they are both for a while in the very warm waters. Eventually, FLOSSIE takes that turn to the north and encounters cooler waters to the north. Meanwhile, ERICK taking a turn to the west and enhancing maybe some slightly cooler air, but wind shear is really going to be the big thing that slows it down and eventually tears it apart south of the Hawaiian Islands. With the warm waters, of course, we have plenty of potential energy for these tropical cyclones to use, and you can see that in any area that's shaded in blue. The brighter colors indicate more energy available. These look to have plenty of it available in the next couple of days, or really next 7 to 10 days. All right, let's jump to the Atlantic now. And we're wrapping up July, which, climatologically speaking, is usually pretty quiet. It's not a surprise to have a lack of systems in July. Only 8% of all named storms happen in July. It's a 6-month season. The peak of hurricane season comes in mid-September. 34% of all named storms occur then. But we're heading into August, second most busiest month of the 6. 27% of all named storms happen in August. The Atlantic hurricane season here, you can see it graphically. Here we are on that map starting to see a marked increase in that storm potential. This is when we look back at all hurricane seasons in the past. This is typically where we start to see an uptick as we head into early August, but really late August into mid-September is when you really got to keep an eye on anything developing out in the Atlantic. Here's how it looks currently. Satellite imagery, and you could pick a few things out. It's not as quiet as it was maybe even 7 to 10 days ago. We have 3 tropical waves to keep an eye on. One that's moving towards Puerto Rico, 2 more in the open Atlantic. We're going to focus first on the one closest to any land masses. This is the one near San Juan, Puerto Rico. The infrared imagery here, this is Invest 95L. Invest basically just means an investigative area, and 95 is just a number, 0 to 99. L indicates it's in the Atlantic basin. Not much with this. You can certainly see an overall pivot in the atmosphere. There is some circulation, but any convection, thunderstorm activity is really lacking. It's in an area of the Caribbean right now that's nicknamed the graveyard of tropical systems. Why? Well, it's got plenty of dry air here, and historically, wind shear is at a maximum in this area. So you can see it's doing a pretty good job on tearing it apart. We're looking at wind shear here coming out of the southwest to the north and east, blowing the cloud tops off to the north and east there, disrupting any thunderstorm activity. The good news with this system, it's not very strong, but it is bringing some much needed fresh water to a lot of the areas here in the tropical islands. That's going to replenish their fresh water supply. Good news, this is the San Juan, Puerto Rico radar imagery here, showing some heavier downpours here and there, but nothing really organized. So tracking the tropics in terms of the National Hurricane Center's outlook on this, very low chances. Invest 95L, 48 hours from now, 10% chance of building up to be a named storm. 5 days out, 20% chance. So very, very minimal. Of course, it's moving through that area of high wind shear now, but then also that track takes it through and over Hispaniola, mountainous region, tears storms apart too. If it keeps itself together long enough and makes it into the Bahamas, the water temperatures here are much warmer. Also, the wind shear drops off, so there could be a window of opportunity there after we get past mid to late week that we could see some development. What are the models looking at here? Well, pretty much taking it all in that same direction towards Hispaniola and eventually into the southern part of the Bahamas, so we'll watch it there as it gets a little bit closer to Florida. So here we are now, the investigative area, Invest 95L, on our tropical vocabulary pyramid. What's next? Possibilities there for a tropical depression, again, in that very small window. If it does make it to a tropical storm, that's when it will get a name. Here's the setup right now where it currently is. Again, to the south, southeast of San Juan. Water temperatures, not an issue. Very, very warm there right now. Water temperatures all above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what we need for that to develop. But the dry air, what we're looking at here is the water vapor imagery on satellite. The yellow, the orange, all areas very, very dry air. You can see the circulation, some thunderstorm activity, moistening up some layers of the atmosphere, but it's surrounded completely by very, very dry air. On top of that, the wind shear, right over it right now, the reds, purples, yellows all indicate areas of high wind shear, and it is getting torn apart right now by that. But notice the window of opportunity here as you get into the Bahamas when the wind shear really starts to drop on down. We have two other tropical waves to talk about. One here that's in the central parts of the Atlantic now, not really picked up by models very much. However, the third wave that just emerged off the coast of Africa about 36 hours ago is very robust. You can already see there is some spin in this. So this one has potential to watch as we go over the next 10 days. I know that's very far out in the future, but let's follow it along here on the European model as we go way out into the future, okay? This is the area we're watching. Here we are Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Still in the middle of the Atlantic, thousands of miles away from any land masses. Here we are on Friday, 5 days out from now, still in the middle of the Atlantic. Not very much organization still with it, and that's not when we're expecting it to really develop. It's once it gets close to the Leeward Islands, as we get through the weekend. Here we are, early Monday morning, starting to see some general organization with it, and certainly as it passes north of Puerto Rico, potentially by the middle of next week, we could be watching something trying to develop here into a named system. So that's something we're really going to have to watch there. The next name on the list is Chantal. Be only up to the third named storm of the year. As we head into August, what are the breeding grounds that we're going to really keep our eyes on? Well, the Gulf of Mexico pretty much always in play. Very, very warm waters there. We have the southern parts of the Caribbean that could give birth to some development spreading over into the Gulf of Mexico. And in August, we really start to open up the main development region of the Atlantic. And that's far out in the central parts of the Atlantic there with those African easterly waves heading out, seeding the main development region and developing there. We've seen numerous named storms develop in that area. In terms of sea surface temperatures, yeah, we got plenty of warm water out there, but we needed over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. All the areas in orange are those that are over 80 degrees. Notice a large chunk of the central Atlantic is not that warm just yet. Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, parts of the Atlantic are. So if we see these seeds make it far enough out to the west into these areas, the probability of them developing becomes that much higher. So it's certainly something we're going to have to watch. So if you have any questions, you can find me on social media anytime. Facebook, meteorologist Tim Pandajis, or on Twitter, 13 Tim Pandajis. We'll have another update probably middle parts of the week. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day.